Jake opened his eyes slowly, blinking at the soft golden light around him. The air smelled like flowers and something sweet he couldn't name. He wasn't in his small, cold apartment anymore. He was lying on a warm bed made of leaves, soft, cloth, and something like silk. As he sat up, confused, the walls of the room shimmered like living crystal. Changing colors gently, he rubbed his face, thinking maybe he was dreaming or drunk. But then the door slid open without a sound. 3 tall alien women entered the room, each of them graceful and glowing slightly. Their skin shimmered in soft colors, one green, one violet, one pale blue. Their eyes were large, beautiful, and filled with a strange warmth. They wore long robes that floated behind them like mist. One of them smiled and said something in a language Jake didn't understand, but her tone was gentle, kind, like someone greeting a friend. Jake looked at them, then laughed nervously. This is some weird dream, without warning. 2 of the alien women gently lifted him from the bed. He didn't feel scared. It felt nice. They carried him as if he were light as air, like he weighed nothing. He laughed again, this time louder. Okay, sure, carry me like a king. They walked through a glowing hallway into a forest that didn't look real. Huge trees with shining leaves, floating lights, and colorful birds surrounded them. The village was made of living plants, shaped into homes, platforms, and walkways. Everywhere Jake looked, he saw beauty, peace, and smiling alien faces. Children laughed in the distance, and strange alien music played from the trees. The women placed Jake on a soft chair made of moss and flower petals. A group of aliens brought him fruits, steaming bowls of soup, and glowing drinks. Jake picked up a fruit, bit into it, and his eyes widened. It was the best thing he had ever tasted. The alien women clapped and smiled when he ate. They gently touched his arms, shoulders, and hands. Always smiling, one of them said, in soft, broken English, "You chosen male." "Welcome," Jake raised an eyebrow, then smirked. "Chosen, huh? That sounds important." They led him to a small pool of warm water and helped him bathe. Their hands were soft, and their voices whispered words he didn't understand. Everything felt like a dream, like a fantasy someone might pay to experience. But Jake didn't question it, not yet. He laughed, joked, and leaned back, enjoying the attention. The aliens acted like he was something precious, like he mattered more than anything. He hadn't felt this way in years, not on Earth, not anywhere. Later that day, he was given a robe of silk and guided through the village. Everyone bowed slightly as he passed, even the elders. The women told the villagers something in their language, and they nodded with approval at that moment. Jake felt proud, even powerful. "Guess I'm a VIP here," he muttered with a grin. That night, a feast was held in his honor. Glowing fruits, slow dances, and soft music. The women danced around him, their robes flowing like wind and light. Jake couldn't stop smiling, thinking, this is paradise. But not everyone was smiling. From the shadows of the trees, a small alien girl watched silently. She was younger than the others, maybe just a child. Her eyes were big and dark, filled with fear. She didn't clap, didn't smile, and didn't eat. She just stared at Jake, not with wonder, but with warning. Jake saw her for just a moment. Their eyes met. He frowned slightly. Something in her gaze made his stomach turn. But before he could ask anyone about her, she vanished back into the trees. The music played louder, and the women danced closer, distracting him again the next morning. Jake woke up in the same warm bed. One of the women was sitting beside him. Gently brushing his hair, she smiled and placed her glowing hand on his chest. "You happy?" she asked softly. Jake chuckled, more than happy. But somewhere deep inside, a question formed. Why me? Why did these aliens care so much about him? Why treat him like a prince? he shrugged it off and followed the women outside again. But he couldn't forget the little girl's face. Her fear was real. He laughed on the outside, but something inside him had started to wonder. Maybe this wasn't just a dream. Maybe something was wrong, and he just couldn't see it yet. And the longer he stayed, the stranger things began to feel. Jake woke up to soft music, like wind playing with strings in the trees. He stretched and looked around the room. It was beautiful, warm and glowing with color. But something felt different this morning. Not bad, just strange. The alien woman beside him smiled as usual, offered him glowing fruit, and helped him stand. He forced a smile, trying to enjoy the attention. But that little girl's eyes from last night haunted his mind. Why had she looked so afraid when everyone else looked so happy? Jake walked through the village again, guided by the three main alien women. They called themselves Leary, Vela, and Zine. They giggled when he asked questions, brushing off his curiosity with soft laughter and gentle touches everywhere they spoke. Walked, other alien women bowed their heads slightly in respect. Children played with floating orbs. Animals walked beside villagers without fear. It was calm, peaceful, and yet, to clean, to quiet. Jake noticed something new. There were no men in the village, except him. He hadn't seen a single male since he arrived. Where were they? He finally asked Zine, "Are there no other males?" She paused for a moment, then smiled, "Only special ones like you." Jake laughed nervously. "That's a little creepy." But she just touched his face and said, "You are important, chosen." They kept walking. But Jake was no longer smiling freely. Something was off. He could feel it in the way the others watched him too closely. In the way his legs felt weaker, even though he'd been eating and resting well, in the way the same words kept repeating, "You are chosen," that afternoon. Jake finally saw another human man, but it shocked him. He was sitting in a corner of the garden. Surrounded by alien women, his face looked blank, emotionless. Like he had forgotten how to smile, Jake walked toward him and waved. "Hey, you okay?" The man looked up slowly. His lips twitched into a weak grin, but he didn't answer. Jake tried again. "Where are you from?" "Earth." The man blinked slowly, then nodded once, like his body worked slower than normal. Before Jake could ask more, two alien women gently led the man away. Whispering something soothing, Jake stood frozen, watching them disappear into a tall treehouse. Why didn't he talk? He whispered to himself. Leary appeared behind him, her voice soft. "He is tired." "Don't worry." Jake turned to her. "Tired from what?" "This place is like heaven." Leary only smiled. "Paradise. Still needs rest." That night, there was a new ceremony. The villagers wore glowing clothes and danced in a circle around Jake. He sat in a large flower-like throne made of vines and petals. They gave him drinks that made his head feel light and warm. Soft music played, and alien women took turns dancing close to him, touching his arms, his face, his chest. Each touch made him feel warm, almost dizzy, but not in a bad way. They whispered strange words in his ears. Words he couldn't understand, but felt too gentle to be dangerous. Jake smiled again, trying to relax, but then he saw her, the little girl, hiding behind a tree, watching again. Her eyes were wide, and she was shaking her head slowly. Her tiny hand made a slashing motion across her neck. A warning. Jake blinked in surprise, but when he looked again, she was gone. The ceremony ended, and Jake returned to his room. His feet were heavy, his body tingled, and his heart beat. Slower than normal, he lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Something was wrong. This place was beautiful. Yes, but it was too much, too perfect. The food was always ready, the women always smiling. No one ever argued, no one got tired. No one said no, and that man, why did he look so broken? Jake remembered how his hands had trembled, how his smile felt forced. He remembered how his own hands were starting to shake now too. Was it the food? The drinks? The touches? He sat up suddenly and looked at the glowing bowl of fruit beside his bed. He sniffed it. It smelled sweet, too sweet. He didn't eat it this time, just pushed it aside and lay back down. Outside, he heard soft voices, alien women whispering gently. Moving past his window, were they watching him even? Now? He turned to the wall and closed his eyes, pretending to sleep, but sleep didn't come easy anymore. He kept seeing that girl's face, afraid, urgent, warning him, and for the first time since arriving here, Jake didn't feel like laughing anymore. He felt like running, but he didn't know where. Because paradise had no doors, only smiling guards in the form of beautiful women. And Jake had just realized he might be their guest, but he wasn't free. Jake waited until the moon rose high above the trees. The alien village became quiet, music fading into the wind. He lay still on his bed, eyes open, pretending to sleep outside his window. Shadows moved slowly, alien women walking in pairs. Whispering, watching, he waited longer, heart beating hard in his chest. Then, when everything was silent, he slipped out of bed and moved silently toward the door. It opened with a soft hiss, and Jake stepped into the night barefoot. The moss under his feet was cold, but he didn't stop. He had to find answers. He moved through the trees like a shadow, avoiding the glowing pathways. He remembered a sound he had heard earlier, water crashing down, hidden behind the trees. The sound led him now. Guiding him through the darkness, branches brushed his skin. Insects buzzed softly, and glowing birds shifted in the trees above. Soon he found it. A waterfall hidden behind a thick curtain of vines. The water glowed faintly, blue and silver under the moonlight behind the falls. Jake saw something, a black hole in the stone wall. A cave. He stepped through the curtain of water, soaking his robe, but not caring. Inside the cave, it was cold and quiet. His feet splashed gently on the wet stone floor, echoing softly. Then he saw it, a figure slumped against the wall, chained by the ankles and wrists, a human. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The man looked old, skin pale and wrinkled, hair thin and white. But his body was strange, not weak, just drained. His eyes were sunken but open, watching Jake without surprise. "You're new," the man said, voice dry and cracked. Jake stepped closer, shocked. You're human." The man smiled bitterly. Jake knelt down, confused. "What happened to you? Why are you chained here?" The man coughed weakly. "They love us," he said, "but not the way you think." Jake looked at the chains. They were made of vine and crystal, humming softly with energy. The man pulled against them slightly, but they tightened. "I came here like you," he whispered, carried, fed, praised, touched. Jake's eyes widened, touched. The man nodded. "Every touch takes something from you. Your energy, your life." Jake stepped back, slowly, remembering the soft hands brushing his arms, his chest, his face, the warm fruit, the glowing drinks. "The dizziness after each meal, they're draining me," Jake asked, feeling cold all over. The old man looked at him sadly. "Yes," slowly, sweetly. "So you won't notice until it's too late?" Jake clenched his fists. "Why don't you escape?" The man chuckled dryly. "Tried many times, but once they taste you, they don't let go." Jake looked around the cave, then at the chains. "Who are you?" He asked quietly. "Name's Carter," the man said. "Came here 2 years ago. At least, I think it's been that long." Jake's mouth went dry. "You look 70. Carter grinned. "I was 30 when I got here," before Jake could speak. Footsteps echoed in the cave, voices soft, whispering in that same alien language. Jake turned and saw glowing shapes moving behind the waterfall. "They're coming," Carter said. "Hide." Jake dove behind a jagged rock. Heart racing, holding his breath, two alien women entered the cave. Carrying a bowl of glowing liquid, they walked slowly toward Carter. Smiling softly. "Time to eat. Chosen," one of them whispered. Carter didn't move. Just stared ahead with dull eyes. One of the women dipped a silver spoon into the bowl and held it to his lips. He drank slowly, a bit of light spreading through his skin. His face relaxed slightly, and he sighed. "Tastes like roses and death." The women giggled as if he'd told a joke. Jake watched in horror. They were keeping him alive, just enough to keep feeding from him. After a few minutes, the women left, the bowl empty, their robes brushing against the stone. Jake waited until their footsteps faded, then stepped out, shaking. "Why do they keep you alive?" he asked. Carter looked up. "Because I'm not done yet," he said. "They never let their favorite food die." Jake looked at the chains, then back toward the waterfall. His hands were shaking, his mouth dry. "I have to get out," he whispered. Carter nodded slowly. "Then don't let them touch you again." Jake turned to leave, but Carter spoke one last time. "Tell the others. If you find any, before they forget how to speak." Jake ran back into the night, heart pounding, mind spinning. He had laughed when they carried him, but now he understood. He wasn't their guest, he was their meal, and the real paradise was only for them, not for him, not for any human who stayed too long. Jake couldn't sleep that night. He sat alone in the room that once felt like a dream. The soft walls and glowing light felt like a trap. He remembered Carter's face, pale, empty, drained. He remembered the alien women holding the bowl, feeding him like a child, keeping him alive, but never free. Jake stared at his hands, then at the glowing fruit beside him. He didn't touch it, not anymore. His body already felt slower, his head heavier than before. He had to act before it was too late. In the morning, the alien women came again. They smiled gently and helped Jake dress in soft robes. Their hands brushed his skin with care, but Jake flinched slightly. He didn't want them to touch him anymore. Their smiles faded for just a second, a flicker of confusion, maybe even disappointment, but they said nothing, only guided him toward the village center. Today was the day of light, a festival they claimed was sacred. Jake saw it now for what it really was, another excuse to keep him surrounded. Another chance to drain him slowly while making him believe it was love. Colorful lights hung from the trees. Music floated in the air like perfume. Sweet and slow, alien women danced in circles, spinning like petals in the wind. They pulled Jake into the celebration, hands on his arms, his back, his chest. He smiled. But it was forced. Every touch now felt like a small theft. He felt it clearly now, each contact pulling something from inside him. It wasn't pain, but it left him emptier each time. No one else noticed, or maybe they didn't care. The other villagers clapped, laughed, and cheered. But Jake's eyes searched for someone, the little alien girl. She was the only one who had warned him. After the dance, Jake slipped away. Pretending he was tired, one of the women, Leary, tried to follow, but he gently waved her off. He walked into the trees, deeper than before, and there she was, sitting alone by a glowing pool. The little alien girl looked up, then quickly looked away. Jake walked closer, his voice low. "Why did you warn me?" The girl didn't answer at first, just stared into the water. Then she whispered, Because I had a brother." Jake sat down beside her. Stunned, she finally turned her head, her eyes wide and sad. "They took him too," she said softly. "He was kind like you, funny like you." Jake's voice cracked. "What happened to him?" She didn't blink. He disappeared after he stopped laughing. Jake closed his eyes, his chest tightening. "They say you are a gift," she said, "but they take your light." Jake looked at her closely. "Do you know what they are?" She nodded slowly. "Energy feeders." "But they don't call it that. They call it love." Jake's heart dropped. She went on. "They don't hurt. They don't break you. They drain you with kindness, with warmth." Jake remembered the soft hands, the gentle voices, the way he felt safe. Now he knew it wasn't love. It was a slow, sweet death. He asked, "Why don't they drain each other?" She shook her head. "It doesn't work on their kind. Only on you." Jake stood up, feeling weak but burning inside. "This has to stop," he said. The girl looked afraid. "They'll never let you leave." "Not after touching you, Jake." Turned toward the village, but the girl grabbed his arm. "There's something else," she said. "They feed on crystals too." "Before they found your kind," he stopped. "Crystals." She pointed to the tall shrine in the middle of the village. "Energy crystals, they still use them. For power, for light." Jake's eyes narrowed. "And if I steal one?" Her voice trembled. "Maybe it can help you escape. Break the field." Jake nodded. His plan forming slowly. "I'll need help," he said. The girl hesitated, then whispered, "I'll show you where they keep the old paths." They snuck through the forest until they reached a forgotten clearing. Old stones formed a hidden door under the moss. Jake pulled it open and found a tunnel leading to the heart of the village. The girl handed him a glowing stone. "This will light the way." Jake stepped inside, turning back to look at her. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. She looked down, then said, "Because if you escape, maybe my brother will too." Jake nodded once, then disappeared into the dark tunnel behind him. The trees whispered, and the sky turned red with the setting sun. Now Jake knew the truth. They weren't angels, they weren't lovers, they were energy harvesters. And he was their brightest flame. But now, he was also their biggest mistake. Jake moved carefully through the hidden tunnel, his heart pounding in his chest. The walls were damp and cold, glowing softly from the crystal the girl had given him. He didn't know how much time he had before someone noticed he was missing. The tunnel twisted and turned, leading deeper into the earth. It finally ended under the shrine, the tallest and brightest place in the village. He climbed up through a crack in the stone, emerging behind the crystal altar. There it was, a large glowing crystal, humming with soft energy. It pulsed like a heartbeat, filling the shrine with light. Jake stared at it, knowing this was the key. The girl said. The force field surrounding the village ran on crystal energy. If he could take one of the power crystals and reach the forest edge, he might be able to break through. But there was a problem. The shrine was never unguarded. As Jake stepped closer, he heard voices approaching. He ducked behind a curtain of hanging vines and watched two alien women enter. They were dressed in ceremonial robes, their faces calm and unreadable. They knelt before the crystal, placing small offerings of fruit and flowers. Jake held his breath, not daring to move. His fingers tightened around the crystal shard in his hand. The women finally left, their soft footsteps fading away. Jake wasted no time. Stepping out and moving to the main crystal, he placed his hands on it. It was warm, alive, buzzing with power. He pulled hard, and with a cracking sound, the crystal loosened from its base. Lights flickered around the room, and a low hum echoed through the shrine. Jake grabbed the crystal and shoved it into his satchel, then slipped back into the tunnel. He didn't look back, just ran behind him. Alarms began to sound low, musical tones that still carried panic. They had noticed the crystal was missing. Jake burst out from the tunnel, into the woods. The girl waiting with a small hover raft. It was old, made from branches, metal, scraps, and vines, but the engine looked intact. She pointed at the back panel. Place the crystal here. Jake didn't ask questions. He pushed the glowing crystal into the engine core. The raft came to life, floating inches above the ground. Jake stared in awe, then looked at the girl. "This can take me to the barrier." She nodded. "If you move fast," Jake climbed onto the raft, gripping the sides as the girl gave him a tiny box. "This will make the barrier weak. Throw it when you see the edge glow." Suddenly, our voice rang out through the forest, soft but full of command. It was Vela, the violet-skinned alien woman who had danced closest to him. She stood on a tree branch above them, her eyes glowing in the dark. "Jake," she called gently, "come back. You don't understand. We love you." Jake's heart twisted. Part of him wanted to believe her. Part of him remembered how safe it had felt in her arms. A guard. But Carter's voice echoed in his mind. They never let their favorite food die. He shook his head. "No, you're feeding on me." Vela smiled sadly. "Only what you give freely," Jake growled. "Then I'm giving nothing now." He slammed the lever, and the raft surged forward. Branches flew past. The wind howled. In his ears, behind him, more voices shouted. Dozens of alien women emerging from the trees. They didn't look gentle now. They looked hungry. Glowing, desperate, Jake raced through the forest, the raft jumping over roots and rocks. He saw the edge, a shimmering wall of blue light flickering in the distance. The barrier, it pulsed like a living thing. Almost invisible unless you looked closely. Jake reached into his pocket and threw the small box the girl gave him. It exploded with a silent flash, and the barrier shimmered violently. Alien women screamed from behind, their cries more pain than anger. Jake didn't slow down, his body shaking, his skin pale. He was weaker now. The touches and food had taken more than he realized, but he held on, teeth gritted, eyes locked on the flickering line ahead. He reached the barrier just as the raft began to sputter. The engine sparked. The glow fading, the crystal was burning out with a final surge of power. The raft slammed into the edge. The light burst around him, blinding and cold. Jake was thrown forward off the raft, through the barrier. He hit the ground hard on the other side, rolling down a small hill. When he stopped, everything was quiet. The forest here was different, darker, colder, and quiet like death. He sat up. Slowly, breathing hard, behind him, the alien women stood at the edge of the barrier. Unable to cross, Vela placed her hand on the light, her eyes full of sadness. Jake stood and turned away, not looking back again. He was free, but he had paid a price. His body was tired, his energy low, his trust broken, but he had escaped the paradise prison, and he would never laugh at soft hands again. Not after learning what they truly wanted, not after seeing what happened when kindness was used to feed. This time, the dream hadn't ended. It had turned into a nightmare. And Jake had finally woken up. Jake staggered through the dark trees, every breath heavy. His clothes were torn, his hands scraped, and his legs barely moved. The cold air outside the barrier felt sharper, thinner, but he was free, or so he thought. Behind him, the force field pulsed slowly, glowing like a cage. Wall in reverse, he looked back one last time, and for a moment, he saw Vela standing there, her hand pressed against the barrier, her face filled with something like sorrow. But he turned away, refusing to believe it was real. Freedom came with fear. Jake didn't know this side of the world. The trees were taller, the skies darker. No music played here, no soft lights glowed. It felt like stepping from heaven into a graveyard. Still, he kept moving, holding the broken crystal shard in his hand like a weapon. The forest stretched on, no paths, no signs, no sounds, except the wind. Jake's feet ached. His strength faded faster than it should have. They had drained him more than he realized. He collapsed near a fallen tree and tried to rest, but his sleep was short. broken by rustling in the dark. When he opened his eyes, he saw something glowing far behind the trees. Not the soft village light. No, this was something faster. Flickering, moving, they were coming. Jake stood up, panic racing through his veins. They had crossed the barrier. Or worse, the barrier was never real. He ran, pushing through vines and low branches. His legs burned, but the fear pushed him forward. Then he saw it. A set of small wooden steps built into the hill, hidden. By roots, he climbed quickly, the old boards creaking under his weight. At the top was a ruined shelter, overgrown and crumbling inside. He found old human equipment, a broken cum device, a solar lamp, and a small medkit. He grabbed the lamp, lit it, and sat in the corner, trying to think. The girl said they wouldn't stop, not once they tasted him. They didn't just drain life, they became addicted to it. A soft sound behind him made him freeze. Jake turned slowly and saw her, Leary. The green-skinned alien woman. She was soaked, leaves in her hair, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "Jake," she whispered, voice shaky, "please don't run." He raised the lamp, not sure if it would stop her. "You followed me?" he said, breathing hard. She stepped forward slowly. "We never wanted to hurt you." Jake's voice cracked. "You chained that man. You drained him for years." Leary flinched, pain flashing in her eyes. "He asked us to stop, but we couldn't." Jake stepped back. "That's not love. That's feeding." She nodded slowly. "Yes. But we didn't know how to stop." Jake narrowed his eyes. "Then why are you here?" "To take me back?" Leary's hands trembled. "No. To beg you." He blinked, unsure if he heard her right. "To beg you to come willingly," she said. "To let us live a little longer." Jake felt sick. "So I'm a medicine now." Leary dropped to her knees. "To us, you're the sun." Before Jake could answer, a second figure entered the shelter, Vela, her violet skin shining softly. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes held no malice. "I told them not to chase you," she said, "but some wouldn't listen." Jake looked between them, confused. "Why are you really here?" Vela spoke quietly. "Because others are coming, and they won't ask permission." Jake gripped the lamp tighter. "How many?" 10, she said, "maybe more." Jake turned and ran to the back of the shelter. Throwing open a hatch in the floor, a tunnel led downward. He didn't care where it went, only that it was a way. Leary tried to stop him. "Please," she whispered, "we'll stop if you just return." Jake didn't answer. He dropped into the tunnel and ran. Behind him, footsteps followed. Some fast, some slow, some begged, some shouted, some cried his name. But he didn't turn around. Not once. His breath was fire, his legs numb, but he kept running. Because he understood something now. They didn't just want him, they needed him, like starving wolves in the bodies of angels. He was no longer a guest or a chosen one. He was prey, and the hunt had truly begun. Only this time, he wasn't running to survive, he was running to end it, even if it meant burning everything they ever touched. Even if it meant becoming something they feared. Because now he knew what he was worth, and he wouldn't be drained again. Jake ran through the last tunnel, barely able to breathe. His feet stumbled over rocks. His hands scraped against the narrow walls, but he didn't stop behind him. He could still hear the soft calls, alien voices begging, whispering, pleading, "Jake, come back. We can be gentle. We only need a little." The tunnel ended at the edge of a steep cliff below him. A misty valley stretched out under a pale blue moon, and far in the distance, lights. Moving vehicles, maybe even human rescue stations. Jake's heart pounded. Not from fear, this time, but hope. He had made it. He could see real civilization again, real freedom. But then a sound behind him, footsteps. Not many. Just one. He turned fast. Holding a broken piece of crystal like a blade, Vela stood there alone. Her violet skin was bruised, her robe torn from the chase, but her eyes still glowed with that soft light, the same light that once made him feel safe. Now it only made him tremble. "I told them not to chase you," she said quietly. Jake kept his distance, his voice cold. "But you followed anyway." Vela didn't move closer, not to take you. To say goodbye, he laughed bitterly. "You expect me to believe that?" She looked down, then back, up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You were never just food to me," she said. Jake tightened his grip on the crystal. "Don't say that. Not after everything you made me feel, something we forgot," she whispered. "I don't care what you felt," Jake snapped. "You still drained me." Vela stepped forward slowly. "Do you feel weak now?" "Well?" Jake blinked, his breath catching. He didn't. Not fully. The forest, the tunnel, the running, it should have crushed him by now, but something inside him had changed. "You didn't take everything," he said slowly. "No," Vela said softly. "I gave some back." Jake stared at her, confused. "We can give," she explained, "but we forgot how. Until you reminded us." He didn't know what to believe. Her face was sincere, her voice trembling, but how many lies had sounded sweet in this place? Behind her, more figures appeared in the trees. The other alien women, Leary, Zine, even the younger ones. They didn't come closer. They just stood there silently, watching, not like hunters anymore, like mourners at a farewell. Jake looked down the cliff, then at Vela. His escape was here, a single leap, and he would be out of their reach. But he also knew this was more than just a goodbye. This was a choice, not between life and death, but between running forever or ending it with truth. "Why me?" he asked finally. Vela took a shaky breath. "Because you were the first one to resist with kindness, not hate." Jake laughed sadly. "Kindness almost killed me, but it saved us," she said, stepping back. "Even if you never return, they'll remember you." Jake looked at her one last time. She wasn't smiling, she wasn't glowing. She looked human. He turned to the cliff, wind blowing through his hair. Then he took the broken crystal and dropped it. It shattered on the rocks below. The alien women gasped softly, not from anger, but surprise. He turned back toward them. "I won't come back," he said, "but I won't destroy you either. You already changed us." Vela whispered. Jake walked past her slowly, one step at a time, back through the forest, past the tunnel, past the places where he had almost died. The women didn't follow. They just watched, and for the first time, they let him go. Hours later, Jake reached a small outpost. Real humans, real walls, real machines. They asked where he had come from. He didn't answer at first. He just smiled and said, "Far away. But I'm back now." He never forgot the village, never forgot the warm hands, the soft voices, the terrible truth hidden in beauty, but he also never forgot that even monsters sometimes don't know they're monsters until someone shows them a mirror. And maybe, just maybe, he had been that mirror, not a hero, not a victim, just a man who refused to be used, and that was enough to break a cycle and walk free forever.